While you were sleeping, the most powerful institutions in Bitcoin signed their names to a single document. Michael Saylor's strategy, BlackRock, Fidelity, Coinbase, 9 companies in total, $15 million, and one mission: fund the developers who write Bitcoin's code. And this alliance dropped just weeks before a faction of Bitcoiners will try to force a fork of the network to take Bitcoin back from these exact corporations. Some are calling it stewardship. Others are calling it the dreaded corporate capture of Bitcoin. And the last time Bitcoin fought a war like this, the network split in two. So is this the suitcoiner takeover Bitcoiners have warned about for years? Or is an older question resurfacing, one we thought was settled? What is Bitcoin? This is Truth Block. I'm Hurley. Let's mine truth. One quick favor before we dig in. Most of you watching are not subscribed. That one free tap is the best way to help the channel keep making these videos. I appreciate you. Okay, let's get into it. So how did we get on the brink of Bitcoin's second civil war? Here's the 60-second version. Last October, Bitcoin Core, the software most of the network runs, shipped version 30 and raised a default cap on arbitrary data in transactions from 83 bytes to 100,000. To the developers, this was simple housekeeping. To a huge chunk of node runners, it was an open invitation to stuff the world's hardest money full of JPEGs and spam, forever. Thousands switched in protest to Bitcoin Knots, a version of the core software maintained by veteran developer Luke Dash Jr. Bitcoin Knots has strict spam filters built in. And out of that revolt came BIP-110, an emergency rule to cap non-monetary data for 1 year, enforced by fork if it has to be. Today, only about 1% of mining power is signaling support for BIP-110. And roughly 1 in 5 public nodes runs Knots. And the mandatory signaling window opens in about 16 days. Dante Cook did an excellent breakdown of the full mechanics of BIP-110 right here on Simply Bitcoin on Tuesday, so be sure to watch that video here for more context. Today, I want to take it deeper into what this war is actually about under the surface. Because Bitcoin has been here before. From 2015 to 2017, we fought the first civil war, dubbed the Blocksize War. And it ended with a network splitting and Bitcoin Cash walking off into irrelevance. Jonathan Beer's book, The Blocksize War, is the definitive history, so be sure to pick it up and give it a read if that tickles your fancy. Right now, we are on the brink of a second civil war, and underneath the spam debate sits the oldest question in this space. What is Bitcoin? Whoever defines that question shapes who Bitcoin serves. That's why grown adults are threatening to split a $1 trillion network over a data filter. Money is never neutral, and neither are the people fighting over it. Let's look at the two opposing sides quickly. The monetary purists, led by voices like Luke Dash Jr. and Matthew Crater. Their argument is that Bitcoin is money, full stop, and anything diluting that purpose is an attack. Against them is the neutrality camp, that would say a fee-paying transaction is a valid transaction, and adoption comes through builders and institutions. In that camp is Michael Saylor, Adam Back, Jameson Lopp, and Samson Mow. First, an honest read from someone with no army in the fight. Lyn Alden is respected across both camps, and she co-wrote the definitive study of how Bitcoin's consensus rules actually change. Lyn sat down with Stefan Livera and laid out what she expects in August.
I'm certainly in the camp that Bitcoin is money, and anything that detracts from it is money or complicates, introduces a tax surface. I mean, I'm not really in favor of any of that. But when you have a set of things that already exist, already is consensus, and there's a pretty established complexity of how to mitigate spam in any system. I mean, that goes back decades of research, and because spam can disguise itself and is even hard to define at times. And just kind of reviewing everything that exists about that soft fork proposal, it mostly just kind of rearranges where non-monetary data can go. Some people have very strong opinions on precisely where in the blockchain, like more appropriate types of places to put it. Even debates about whether or not this is even about spam. Because some proponents will say we have to cut down spam, and other people will say, well, read the BIP. It's actually admitting how limited it is at stopping spam. My view is that, kind of the most powerful attribute of Bitcoin is that it's very hard to change. If it was easy to change, so even if you're in favor of fork, like there are fork proposals out there that I'm kind of passively in favor of. I don't really expect them to pass anytime soon. But the kind of the key takeaway is that even if you're in favor of a given fork, the fact that it's really hard to get your fork through is also the defense around people that see things differently getting their fork through. So I certainly think that it's noble to try to find ways to optimize, to maybe add frictions to add non-monetary data into Bitcoin over time. If there's a way that can do that builds consensus, I mean, I'm all ears. But kind of for me, I think the main thing is the marketing around this particular fork, how it seems to differ from what the fork actually offers, and kind of it's become this kind of cultural moment, I think, more so than a technical solution. My base assumption, unless things change between now and a few weeks from now, is that it'll be a minority fork attempt. So if it's not aborted or otherwise changed, then it could potentially result in a chain split. Basically, as soon as miners try to put something in that meets current consensus, but then doesn't meet the consensus of this other chain, there's a high risk of a chain split. So I would, probably would.
And it might even happen before that, right? Because of the mandatory signaling. So literally, it may not even be spam that gets into the block. It may be literally the miners choose not to signal in favor of Pro 110, and that itself will cause a split around August 9th or so.
There are people that are super worried about that, but I think Bitcoin market tests are decent. And sometimes things can't be settled with talk. Sometimes they have to be settled with action and just market attempts. Even as Bitcoiners, as much as we are often against altcoins, sometimes they represent market tests. If people have a very strong opinion that blocks should be bigger, I mean, they got that test in the market. They can use bigger blockchains if they'd like to. I mean, they're out there now. If people think privacy should be on the base layer at the sacrifice of some degree of auditability or other issues, I mean, they have changed for that if they want. If they want a more programmable base layer, it's there for them, and the market can assess that over time. And this is yet another just market test for Bitcoin to go through. And if people disagree on what open source software they want to run, sometimes it just has to go in different directions.
So Lyn says this battle stopped being technical a long time ago. It's a fight over identity, which makes August 9th a referendum on what Bitcoin is. And catch your other point, because it carries this episode. Bitcoin has no committee and no CEO. You run the software you believe in, and the market prices the result. Next up, we have the man the purists call the face of everything going wrong, Michael Saylor, in his own words. And I promise one of these clips will stop you cold. But before we get there, a word about surviving weeks like this. Fork deadlines and Civil War headlines are exactly when people panic sell coins they stacked for a whole cycle and regret it for years. That's the problem Ledn was built to solve. Instead of selling your Bitcoin, you borrow dollars against it. Up to 50% of your stack's value, funded in under 6 hours, with no credit checks, no capital gains event, at around half the rate of a credit card. With Ledn, your stack stays yours. Your upside stays yours. Ledn has issued over $10 billion in loans across every cycle since 2018 and never lost a single Satoshi of client funds. So head to learn.ledn.io/simply to see how it all works. Alright, so what is Bitcoin? Well, let's look at the purest answer straight from the source, the title Satoshi put on the white paper. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. For the monetary camp, that's a mission statement. Bitcoin is cash. And that word means more than people realize. Today, when we say cash, we think of paper dollars. But the word is far older than the dollar. Cash traces back to the Latin capsa, a box, and came into English through the French caisse, the money chest. The cash box. Cash meant the money you held yourself. No bank, no counterparty. Ready to store value and ready to spend. Store of value and medium of exchange in your own custody. That's the word Satoshi chose. And Bitcoin is the first money in history that does both jobs natively, for everyone on Earth. So take the purists seriously. But while they were guarding the definition, Saylor built a $60 billion machine on a different answer. Everything you're about to hear from him happened in a single week in Prague last month. Here he is on the keynote stage, opening by conceding the purist's entire frame with a banker's quote that's 100 years old.
I'm a big fan of Murray Rothbard. I read a lot of Austrian economics. I've read 10,000 pages of Murray Rothbard. All of his economic histories and all of his histories of the American colonies conceived in liberty, and lots of his histories of banking and the Depression. The Austrian economist would say, gold is money, everything else is credit. The classic J.P. Morgan quote 100 years ago, gold is money, everything else is credit. A Michael Saylor quote 100 weeks ago, Bitcoin is money, everything else is credit. that is true in the Austrian frame of reference, because Bitcoin is the bearer asset without counterparty risk. And so thinking through an Austrian lens, Bitcoin is money, art and real estate are just goods. Bonds are credit, equity is equity. If you create a token backed by Bitcoin, which I'll call a yield coin, that would be credit in the Austrian framework.
By Saylor's own definition, Bitcoin is the money and every product Strategy sells is credit. Both camps hold the same definition. The war is over what gets built on top and who ends up holding the real thing. And the day before that keynote, someone asked Saylor how he'd make $1 billion starting from zero. His answer is very revealing.
How do you make money? Make the money. Like literally make, who made the most money in the last 1,000 years? The people that made the money. The goldsmiths, right? The bankers make the money. If I have a bunch of gold and I start issuing gold-backed credit notes, and then and pretty soon you've got $1 billion of gold and you issue $2 billion of gold-backed credit notes, you just created $1 billion out of thin air. You're just making the money. What we're doing is creating credit money with STRC. Strive is creating credit money with SATA.
He just compared his own model to the goldsmiths, and every Bitcoiner knows that story. It's chapter 1 of how honest money was captured. Issue more paper claims that there is gold in the vault. Create money from thin air and grow into the banks that rule the world today. So when the largest corporate holder of Bitcoin tells that story with a smile and lands on what we're doing is creating credit money, that is the exact nightmare the purists organized against. They aren't paranoid. They heard him correctly. But now the steel man, because he has one. The goldsmith trick worked in the dark, where nobody could audit the notes against the gold. Bitcoin's ledger is public. Strategy's holdings are disclosed, and STRC is over-collateralized, the opposite of a fractional claim. In Saylor's own framing, his products are credit, not Bitcoin, and nobody is forced to buy them. So let the question linger, because the goldsmiths never corrupted gold. They corrupted the claims on gold, and the claims are what the world ended up holding. So could that happen here? One of the most respected voices in Bitcoin says it's already starting. Enter Parker Lewis, author of Gradually Then Suddenly, a builder in Bitcoin payments, and a writer whose work was formative on my own trip down the rabbit hole. This month, he's been taking heavy fire for saying things like this on what Bitcoin did.
Not only are they complex financial structures, but at a higher level, their whole strategy is to get people to not buy Bitcoin, but to buy their stock instead.
And that's just the polite version. Here's his full argument.
But it's a difference to say, like, don't spend your Bitcoin, to saying that Bitcoin payments is an unfortunate part of, the historical narrative, and to be antagonistic to the use of Bitcoin as payments, because that is a necessary part of the end game. Like if you hear someone like Jack Dorsey talk about it, where he says like, Bitcoin needs to be everyday money to work, to be successful. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody needs to be paying for things in Bitcoin today, but as an end state or an end game, that needs to be the end game, because otherwise, if Bitcoin was just locked up in a relatively few large institutions, it would be so centralized that it would not be resistant to censorship. If it's not resistant to censorship, then the whole exercise is moot. If it's not resistant to censorship, you've just recreated the fiat system. And one of the other things that occurred in my flippening on the Bitcoin treasury companies was like, we turn Bitcoin into money. Digital credit is the most important inflection in the history of Bitcoin. Credit on Bitcoin is bigger than Lightning or multi-sig. Like that is like implicitly the comment. But then Saylor also made a comment about how what was happening with the preferred stock of Strive was the most interesting thing happening in Bitcoin. It was happening at a time where Square was rolling out Bitcoin payments to 4 million merchants. Like,
crazy.
What are we talking about? And so I don't think like Saylor's bad. It's like, I wish that like 2020 Saylor would come back.
Yeah. That's exactly where I'm at.
He's in there.
Give Parker his due, because this is the strongest form of the purist argument. If Bitcoin's end game is coins locked inside a handful of custodians and credit wrappers, censorship resistance dies. And censorship resistance is the whole point. Without it, you've built the fiat system with extra steps. Self-custody is the property that makes Bitcoin Bitcoin. On all of that, I stand with Parker completely. Where we part ways is on steering. Bitcoin is for everyone. The saver in cold storage, the barber in Austin taking sats on a Square terminal, and the suit who will only touch Bitcoin through a yield product, because that's the only door he trusts. Nobody gets to force the order in which the world adopts better money. Monetization is organic. It ebbs, it flows, and it takes detours through instruments we might not like. And look around. The market is already grading those instruments. No soft fork required. Satsuma, a London-listed treasury company backed by Mark Moss, just voted to sell all 668 of its Bitcoin and shut down. Jack Mallers just stepped down as CEO of 21, a job he said he'd hold for the rest of his life when he took it about 5 months ago. The weak treasury vehicles are unwinding one by one, and when the in-group starts closing up shop, I smell a bottom. So the free market is running the exact filter the purists want to hard-code into consensus. It just runs on incentives instead of forks. Notice what both armies actually agree on. Bitcoin you hold yourself is the real thing. Everything else is a claim. Whichever side you take, the answer starts in the same place. And that's why this show is brought to you by Bitkey. Bitkey is self-custody built for real life. There's no seed phrase to lose, and the new device has a screen, so you can see exactly what you're approving before you approve it, including transactions, recoveries, and address changes. Plus, with Bitkey, recovery and inheritance are built right in. No subscription and no extra service. In my opinion, this is hands down the best Bitcoin wallet on the market for ease of use, rock-solid security, and peace of mind. So head to bitkey.world/truth and use the promo code TRUTH for 10% off the new Bitkey. Which brings us back to this morning. The Bitcoin Security Consortium. 9 members, $15 million over 3 years, coordinated by the head of Brink, the nonprofit that pays Bitcoin Core developers. The purist read writes itself. The dark warning behind the whole Core 30 revolt was that core developers answer to corporate sponsors. Today, that arrangement got a logo slide and a press release. But run the other read, too. The release states in writing that the consortium takes no position on protocol changes and does not direct development. And look at who signed. Blockstream, which is Adam Back's company, Block, which is Jack Dorsey's. Names that spent years on opposite sides of every Bitcoin argument, now on one letterhead. If this is a takeover, it's the strangest crew of captors ever assembled. And one more small detail almost nobody's flagged. The consortium's flagship cause is quantum security. 5 weeks ago in Prague, Saylor was calling quantum an imaginary problem that people dream up to farm engagement on X. Now it's priority number 1 on his consortium's letterhead. Make of that what you will. Because whether this group keeps its hands off Bitcoin's rules is, in the end, a trust question. And Bitcoin was invented so you never have to settle for trust. Run your own node, and their $15 million buys exactly 0 votes over your rules. Hold your own keys, and no consortium on Earth can touch your money. And if you've never set up a node or your coins are still on an exchange, that's the exact gap the Bitcoin way closes. With the Bitcoin way, you get one-on-one white glove help from real human Bitcoin experts. Self-custody, hardware, node setup, inheritance planning, locking down your security. No question is too basic for the Bitcoin way. And the first 30-minute consultation is completely free when you go to thebitcoinway.com/Hurley. In a week when everyone is fighting over who controls Bitcoin, there's something clarifying about becoming your own answer. So get serious about self-custody and security today with the Bitcoin way. Now let's zoom all the way out. Every money in history had a war exactly like this one. Gold had it. The metal against the goldsmith's notes. The money against the claims on the money. And gold lost that war for one reason. Nobody could verify the claims. The battle for Gold Soul was fought in the dark and settled by the men who held the vault keys. Bitcoin's second civil war is the first monetary war in history fought entirely in the light. Every signaling block is public. Every node is counted. $15 million can pay developers, but it can't buy a consensus rule. 1% of hash power can raise an army on X, but it can't force a fork on your node. The most powerful weapon on every side turns out to be the same one. Run your software, hold your keys, and refuse to move. Fiat settles its monetary arguments with bombs, decrees, and printing presses. Bitcoin settles them with blocks. So no, I don't believe this war breaks Bitcoin. The purists guard the soul. The suits build the on-ramps. The market grades them both without mercy, and 21 million doesn't move for any of them. This is what the monetization of honest money looks like from the inside. Loud, tribal, uncomfortable, and self-correcting. Honest weights and honest measures enforced by mathematics no faction can vote away. And personally, that's why my conviction doesn't sit with either army. Honest weights and scales that can't be rigged were written into creation long before we got here, and Bitcoin simply submits to them. A committee can't vote away the laws of nature. Neither can a consortium of suits. Okay, so now I want to hear from you. Is the Bitcoin Security Consortium stewardship or capture in broad daylight? In the bigger fork in the road, Bitcoin is money versus Bitcoin is digital credit. Is that the real war, or is picking a side the wrong frame entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this episode gave you signal, please give it a like and share it with someone who thinks Bitcoin is tearing itself apart. And subscribe to Simply Bitcoin for more signal every single day. I'm Hurley, this is Truth Block. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.